Hello everyone, my name is Carrow. I write urban fantasy. I also write romance under the pen name of Faye Black, and I'm here to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is writing groups. I wanted to discuss writing groups this time because I have talked about it in the past, but I've kind of grown and developed a little bit of a person and developed a better vernacular in order to kind of explain the entity known as a writing group, and also because I've been thinking about joining one, but there's not really any in my area, so I've been thinking more about it because I've been thinking about hosting my own blah 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 blah. All that kind of stuff. Because there's so much that goes into a writing group and some folks may have thought about joining them or they don't know about them or anything like that, I thought that this would be a really good video to kind of touch on what writing groups are, what to look out for, what they can look like, and kind of like the process of finding one that's going to be good for you. So let's go ahead and talk about the purpose of a writing group. This can also be referred to as a critique group, and what happens at these little gatherings is you bring samples of your writing, you share them with everybody, and they give you some feedback. Now, how this sharing happens kind of depends on the group and how they want to do things. I've attended, I don't know, probably about 10 different groups, and I've seen everything from delivering it ahead of time to give feedback at the session to speed it up. I've also seen the ones where you kind of read it live while you're there, and then I've also seen the ones where there's so many people that have attended that they break off into groups to go and do the reading at those places. So when you're looking at joining a writing group, I would make sure that you pay attention to what that's going to look like and see if it's going to mesh well for you. For example, I don't really go to the groups that want you to read ahead of time and bring the stuff because the chances of that person actually being there are kind of 50-50, and I really don't like to waste my time. So I tend to lean towards the groups that do like the live writing because at least then I know that those people are there and that my feedback will be given to them. Another purpose of writing groups is learning, and I'm not talking about just learning writing craft, I'm talking about learning in general. The people who go to these groups are very diverse, they have lots of different life experiences, and they also have been exposed to a lot of different things. So you will probably at some point learn something by attending these groups on a regular basis. The group that I used to go to way back in the day, like a couple years ago, we had a baker, we had somebody that used to be a convicted criminal, we had me who had been in the military and teaching at the time. We also had somebody that was a tech writer, and like just like an array of people that were there. So, and you know, they would bring like their understanding of various topics to the writing if it was off point, which I, as a fan and a lifelong learner, being, you know, kind of informed about different things that I may not have a full scope of is, you know, I think that's pretty cool. The other purpose of a writing group outside of getting feedback and kind of expanding your knowledge base is also going to be networking and socialization. A lot of you guys who are active writers also know it's a very solitary practice. We are kind of locked in our desks in the corner or wherever it is that we write in the house, and we don't really engage with other writers or other people very often. So going to these gatherings with other writers who kind of understand like the dilemma of writing and why characters may not be as good as we want them to be and all that other stuff, that's really nice. The networking aspect comes in the sense that, like I said, you get a lot of different people that go. Some of them may be, you know, people that work at a publisher, or they may be cover artists, or, you know, any of those things. So it never really hurts to go and meet friends with people, but on the networking thing, I will tell you that if you only talk to these people when you want something from them, it may not be the relationship that you work. So go for friends first and go for professional afterwards. Now, we talked about writing groups, what they are, what you can get from them. I want to talk about where they happen at, and there's really two big places that they happen at. One's virtual and the other one is in person. Virtual is, you know, think about your Zoom calls, or maybe they might do like a live stream where they do like live critiques or anything like that. I've seen that. But pretty much the crux of it is you still do it in your house, you don't actually physically go anywhere, and that's it. Physical groups are a little more complicated because those can happen in libraries, they can happen in cafes. I went to one in a village inn for 3 years, so you know, it's the place. The only thing I will say about the place is kind of the thing I want to say about the place, and I'll talk about it a little bit more if you're looking at hosting your own group. But pay attention to where it is that you're going and try to be respectful when you are there. If that group has been going there for a while and you come in and you're kind of like, you know, crude to the staff and stuff like that, and you never come back, the group still has to live with what you did to the staff. And, you know, I'm not really a big fan of like upsetting people in their place when, you know, I'm using their space to do whatever it is that I want to do. So just kind of keep in mind where you're going and, you know, how to behave while you're there. That kind of segues us into if you would like to have your own writing group. And again, you can have this in whatever capacity works really well for you. Determine a location that is going to be feasible for you. And I'm going to keep emphasizing you because this is going to be your group and it's going to be how you want to have it. And because you're going to be the one running and facilitating it, it's kind of like it needs to work for you first. The one thing I will say about other writers is if they don't mesh very well, they will just leave and go somewhere else that does. So find something that's comfortable and fits within your availability and what you're comfortable with, and kind of stick to that, and everybody else will figure it out. For example, I would like to actually host my group in person in my local area, and there's two reasons for that. One, I spend a lot of time in this room. I spend a lot of time looking at the screen, and I get kind of tired of that. Second is that I have lived in this place for almost 2 years and I don't go outside very much. So for my own mental well-being, I would like to leave the house. I would like to be exposed to different people, and I would just like to, you know, kind of see the area that I have moved to. So for my purposes and my priorities, I would have an in-person group. Now, where it would be in that is kind of up in the air. There's a couple different locations, and I haven't researched those yet, and I want to research those, and I also want to contact those places to make sure that it's okay. One thing that some folks don't take in mind is when you go to a place that's like a hospitality place, so if you go to a cafe or you go to a restaurant, you're going to be sitting and taking up space in that place, and that could be spaces that are used for other customers. And writing groups, I will warn you, can go anywhere between 2 and 3 hours, depending on how many people go and how many pages that you allow to be read at a time. So those 2 to 3 hours could be for other people that would pay for something. So again, reiterating and summarizing just a little bit more, research your location, talk to the owners if there are owners, get their okay with it, and then kind of like warn them that you're going to be there when and how much space that you may need. Don't be surprised, because I've seen this happen, don't be surprised if your attendance fluctuates, because I've had writing sessions where only 3 of us showed up and, you know, we still kept going. I've also had writing sessions where 20 people showed up, and those are a little wild, but don't be surprised. You may not always have the same number of people all the time. The other thing with hosting your own writing group is that you need to establish guidelines, and you need to stick to those guidelines. And don't make too many exceptions. Like you might have a rare case where you might kind of bend it a little bit, but those are going to be the things that save you from questionable personalities. And what I mean by guidelines is, again, what time do you start? How long does the group go? I don't advise having a group that lasts longer than 3 hours. So you start, like, you know, I start at 6, we end at 9, right? Like, we're done. And that way, when people start getting super chatty in the middle of the readings, you can say, hey, we have to end at 9, let's redirect, and, you know, all of that. The other thing with guidelines is that you also are going to talk about how much that people are going to bring. I don't really have too much of a pony in this race. I have forever brought 6 pages times New Roman 12 to a writing group for a very long time, and that worked just fine for me. Some places will ask you to bring a chapter, and the problem with bringing a chapter is you don't know if it's going to be 2,000 words or 6,000 words, so you could be there for a very long time. So I would say stick to page count or word count and just ask them to bring that. And 6 pages is honestly pretty good to bring to get feedback on, and it allows everybody else to have a turn. As I said before, sometimes you will have 3 people and sometimes you will have 20, so you never really know. Now, the exception I talked about is, again, if only 3 of us showed up and you just happened to bring, you know, 6 more pages and said, hey, since we're here, can we go ahead and read the rest of this? You know, maybe they'll say yes because there's nobody else there, but, you know, for the respect of everybody else's time. And I have seen some individuals kind of push back on that, and honestly speaking, sometimes the pushback I see are people who are trying to take control of a situation, and they might say something a little harsh or a little harmful towards you, and just keep in mind that they can go anywhere else. Don't take it personal. Just nod, say thank you, we're not changing this, and have a good day. I do know that some writing groups in their guidelines also talk about what writing they will read, and they'll also say what writing they don't want to read. Obviously, if you're a middle grade writing group, you're not going to want to have, like, you know, sexy times romance author bringing their stuff in. That might make some of your other, you know, writers uncomfortable. Some people are kind of like free for all, bring whatever, we'll read it all and give you feedback. So if you are going to host a group and you only want like a certain type of writing, or you definitely don't want a particular type, make sure that that's clear, so that way, again, you fall back on that if somebody brings something that you're kind of like, oh, no. So So the other thing I would like to talk about on guidelines, and then I'm going to move off on that, is do not make 500 guidelines. That causes cognitive overload, and that will make people tune out, and they're not going to read all of your guidelines. The golden rule for that is make 5 guidelines, make sure that they are worded clearly, and that they, page count, time, and, the 3 behaviors or kinds of writing that you want. So just make 5 guidelines, stick to those, and you should be fine. So I've kind of talked about what writing groups are, kind of things if you want to host your own. Now we're going to move into like the weird territory of what will happen if you go to one or if you host one. People are weird and delightful, and you're going to encounter a lot of different people at these writing groups, regardless if you are attending or you are hosting. I have met people that were like rocket scientists and genetic engineers, and I've also met people that I really wanted to call 911 on. And I want you to notice that I'm not completely dismissing it, and what I'm really encouraging you to do when you have those situations is to not have a lot of pushback. Make a note of it and review it later, because sometimes you may write something and unknowingly, be offensive. And normally your editor is going to catch that, but sometimes, your friends that are going to be in the writing groups will also catch that and kind of let you know. For example, there was another colorful person that brought a manuscript that harped on a stereotype so bad it was just really insulting, and that was probably one of the few times I really lost my temper at a writing group. Like, I yelled at this person and I felt really bad afterwards. And that individual did the writing not knowing that they were being offensive. So when you see things like that, it's like, hey, I read this, it kind of has this connotation, or like it's not really like that. Like, kind of try to clarify if they meant to do it or if they did it unknowingly, and then decide if you want to get angry at them after that. People make mistakes. It's always good to verify them, to make assumptions, and if they are trying to be purposely offensive, decide if it's because that's the way that the character is, or if the author is just that kind of person, and kind of, again, tread water going forward after that. Now, if you are the facilitator for a writing group and you do see that two creatives are starting to kind of go back and forth a little bit on this, you have to step in, and you'll have to be like, you've given the feedback, it can be discussed after the group, but we do have other people whose writings that we need to, get to, so we need to continue onwards. And one thing that I will tell you when you are facilitating these groups is you need to make it clear at the beginning, before the session starts, that you will interrupt people, and you're not doing it to be rude, you're doing it to keep things on task. And if you make that a clear thing at the very beginning, people will be less upset when you cut them off at those heated moments and know that you're just doing your job as a facilitator. So I have gone to a couple writing groups where there were people there, like I said, that made me want to call the cops. Like, one person who came to one of my writing groups would write about minors doing adult things with other minors, and I made it really clear, it made me very uncomfortable, and they said that this was just the kind of stories that they wanted to write for their audience. Naturally, in my head, I'm like, where's your audience so I can tell the cops where they are, right? But if you read something and it makes you really uncomfortable, don't be like, typically what I've done is on the top of the page, I wrote, this makes me very uncomfortable, I don't want to give feedback, and I hand it back in. Like, that's just it. If something really does make you, as a person, upset, or it's kind of distressing to you, there's nothing wrong with getting up and leaving. What you don't want to do is you don't want to cause a fuss in the middle of the writing. Like, there was one person who had a bad experience with a certain situation. So anytime they came across it in writing, they were very disruptive. And at one point we had to say, you can go now. And so they would get up and leave and come back in like 10 minutes, because that's usually how long it would take to do the reading. And then we'd move back into the feedback portion. So I guess what I'm kind of getting to with that is, know what you are not okay with reading, and if you pick up on that, just quietly excuse yourself, write that you just can't give feedback, and then carry on after that. Don't make too much of a scene, because again, you will also encounter the really selfish person who will come and get feedback from everybody else, but then they won't give any. The moment you pick up on that, give them what they give, which is nothing at that point. If you don't waste your time. It's one thing when you waste your time, it's another when you waste mine. And if I'm sitting here spending this time giving you feedback on your stuff, but you give me back a blank copy of my work, then I'm not interested. I really feel like I'm missing something. Give me 1 minute. So we talked about what writing groups were, what they look like, how you can facilitate one, things to do if you're holding them in a physical location, situations that you may encounter, good responses to that. I think the only thing that I want to mention too with writing groups is that I really want to end this on the note that writing groups are actually really beneficial. I learned a lot by attending my regular group once a week for about 3 years, both in writing craft and life experiences. I got to socialize and meet like some really good people, and sometimes that was just the way that I was able to get out and just meet folks. That was like my holy time, the time I got to spend with other writers and expanding my knowledge base and everything else like that. It had rocky times, kind of like, family get-togethers sometimes do, but it was also really good. And I'm very biased. I am for writing groups. I think that folks should go to them in the capacity that they want to. Oh, you know what? I want to talk about the different kinds of groups that you may experience as you're attending. That's a good one. So what I mean by the different types of groups is not the different kinds of locations, it's the kind of cultural environment that you may experience if you are going to one. One of them is what I refer to as the Soul Star group. In the Soul Star group, there is one really good writer. Everybody, praises that writer and they say really nice things. They don't really give a lot of feedback. And if you find something wrong with the writing, everybody then turns on you and basically says that you're wrong. It's a very strange thing. I've gone to 2 groups like that. I don't know what's going on. I never went back, right? So that's the Soul Star group. Got one really good writer. Everybody seems to be like their fan base, and screw you if you don't agree with them. The second group is going to be what I refer to as the Hearts and Minds group. We may be here to work on writing, but we're here more for self-esteem and building up your confidence as a writer. For every one bad thing that you say about, or one critique that you give about the writing, you have to say 2 positive things, right? And that's not really my jive, but some people may need that. I do recommend it for people that are first venturing out into writing and they are trying to kind of build themselves up as a writer. But I would encourage you to temper yourself against more criticism as you get more experience, just because if you thought that getting feedback in writing group was bad, wait until book reviews come in, because they don't care about you. The other writing group is the mandatory feedback group, and I really hate this group. And the reason I hate this group is because even if somebody else has said your feedback that you would have given, they still want you to say something anyway. So you end up kind of like floundering for like, nice font, nice space margins, right? Like that's what you end up doing. A lot of times I personally will write all of my feedback on the physical copy that is there, and the only time that I will actually speak up is if I would like to get like group opinion on something that I noticed. That's really it. Telling me that I have to speak even though I have nothing to say is kind of weird, but I get that everybody wants to make sure that folks are participating. Remember my earlier comment about the person that takes feedback but gives none, right? So if you want to do that, you can. Maybe find a way to make it possible for folks who don't have anything to say to kind of opt out of it. So this final group is, I call it the Village Inn group because that was the group that I went to. It's experienced writers and experienced readers. We've been around the block a little bit, and we're going to give feedback, and if you want to get upset about it, we'll say, okay, we'll listen to you, and then we're going to move on. We also don't like adverbs. We got to think about that. But again, like most feedback, if you are an adverb person, you can still do that and all that. But what I'm getting with this group is that it's kind of like a no-nonsense, this is our feedback, take it or leave it. And those are the kind of the groups that I really benefit from a little bit, because if you know anything about my personality, it's just blunt, it's to the point, it's what I need, we gotta move on, go, go, go. Now there are different kinds of writing and critique groups, and what I always found to be interesting is that every group kind of knows about the other one, because if you go to one group and you end up not doing very well, like I said, you're going to go to another group, right? And maybe you'll encounter some other people that know about that group, and next thing you know, you're all talking about if you like that group or not, and different kinds of persons and all that. My Village Inn group was kind of known as the asshole group, but the reason they called us assholes was just because when people would get upset when we'd point out things in their writing, we didn't really cater to the person being upset. We would listen to them, nod, move on, and if you are the kind of person that needs, again, your self-esteem to be built up, that's not really a good group for you to go to unless you're ready to be tempered against that kind of criticism. So, again, perceptions, intention, blah, blah, blah. You've heard me talk about that before. But that is my experience with writing groups. Again, I find these to be really beneficial, and I really am thinking about hosting my own at some point just because I would like to have that socialization again in my local area, but we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll just cower out and stay in my house. We'll see. But again, these are my experiences over the last couple of years. I would be interested to hear about your experience with writing groups, if it was positive, if it was negative, what worked, what didn't work, all that. Feel free, comment section, would love to read it. But that does bring us to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for listening to me talk about writing groups. I am looking forward to reading what you have to say. If you know somebody that might benefit from this video, please feel free to send it their way. And that's going to be it for today. So I will talk to y'all again real soon. Be safe, happy writing. Bye.